Okay, so I'm here with Karl McIntyre. Now, Karl is the head of IT and transformation at Liverpool University Hospitals Foundation NHS Trust. So quite a mouthful there, but I think that's correct, isn't it, Karl?
Yeah, that's the one. It's not the easiest to say at the beginning of every meeting, but yeah.
Okay, great. So obviously, this is going to be watched by our computing students at the college. Obviously, they're on a wide range of different courses, but I think you'll have some good insight to give them into sort of your career so far and how you've got to where you are. So just to start off at the beginning, I mean, we've kind of touched on it there, but if you can explain a little bit about your job title and role and what that sort of involves really generally.
Yeah, okay. It's quite a specific role, and I don't think I ever, when I was in education, thought I'd be here when I was doing it.
Yeah.
My role is kind of split into two halves. So there's the IT half, and the IT half of the role is looking after the infrastructure, the software, and all of the integration that lives with that for a large university hospitals trust in Liverpool. That includes, how to get blood results back from a patient, all the way down to sending text messages for people's COVID results currently.
Yeah, lots
so
of that.
That's a complex thing that's come from nowhere in the last few weeks, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the other half of my role is the transformation element, which is partly digital transformation in terms of, introducing new IT systems and new ways of working that are digital first. But the second part of that is more specific. I've done some really unusual projects since starting here. We swapped out the blood bottles used across the entire Liverpool City region, so that we're using a standardised collection method, and that saves something like £1.5 million a year for the NHS.
Okay.
Just by standardising that. So, yeah, it's a really varied role and not one I ever aimed for. I think would probably be the best way of describing it.
Okay, interesting. I mean, that kind of moves us nicely on then. So, I mean, I suspect the answer to this might be that there isn't a set day, but what would if there is one? What would a normal or usual day look like for you in your job?
Yeah, so I suppose there's the two elements, isn't there? There's the program or project work that you're working on at any given point, which is the planned part of your day, and the business as usual elements where something breaks that you didn't expect to break. I'm managing the team and the response to that. So here in the lab, I could be in a situation where the chemistry analyzers or the chemistry integration could fail, and we process tens of thousands of results a day. Nobody's going to type them in, so it's a case of having to respond to that and fix it. But the plan part of the day is around replacing the IT systems we have in place with more modern versions. It's about integrating with our customers so that the people out there can request and view their results electronically, and there isn't paper transferring across the whole of the city in order to make this type of stuff work. I mean, I think at the last check, we serve something like 1.8 million people in the population directly. So there's quite a variance in what we do here. So I suppose we don't have a standard day, but if we did have it, would be that program work. But in the centre of Liverpool, in a very old hospital, as we're waiting for our new build up the road. There's a lot more BAU than there is project work currently.
Okay, so it keeps you on your toes then, you would say?
Absolutely. It's without doubt the most interesting role I've ever done. It is very much a case of no 2 days are ever the same. I can't remember the last time I came into work with a plan for 7 hours work and did that 7 hours work. You're lucky if you get half of what you plan to do done. And the other half is either something exciting that's come from nowhere or something broken that needs fixing immediately. And it's quite a small team here, program team's only 5 people and the IT team another 4. So it's a lot of work for a small group of us.
Yeah, it keeps you busy though. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms then of how you sort of found yourself in the position you're in. I mean, you mentioned there that this is the most interesting role you've had. So it sounds like from what you're saying, you've had a couple of sort of different roles in the past, and this you haven't gone straight into this. So be interesting to hear. I think for students, how sort of what your sort of career path was to get here and what you did in education. So can you talk us through your sort of backstory a little bit then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose I've got a fairly standard backstory, but it's worth saying that I did my college, A levels at college, looked to go into the chemistry industry. I was looking at doing something like chemical engineering. Went to Sheffield University to study that, and if I'm honest, I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't very good at it. I literally just went to the first place that ticked the boxes for the A levels I got, basically. I got chemistry and maths. Chemistry plus maths equals chemical engineering. So I went and did it. Dropped out of university because I really didn't enjoy it. I took a year out in which I started working in the NHS in a really basic data entry type job that I enjoyed doing. I enjoyed working in the public sector. Got kind of interested in the public sector from that point of view, and then went back to university and did a computer science degree. That computer science degree kind of led me into a situation where when I graduated, I was still working at the place I worked in when I was on my year out. And they offered me a job and asked me to, stay on and start doing some computer programming for them. At the time, it was some web-based design for like timesheet type systems, and that was kind of how I got my foot in the door, if you want to put it that way. Mm-hmm. That kind of got me interested. It got me real world experience out of university, which sometimes is really hard. Trying to bridge the gap between the theory and actually doing some of it. Mm-hmm. I was then at that trust for 9 years in 4 or 5 different roles. So I did some database engineering, so specific data platform work in the background. I did some web design. I did some app design. And then kind of moved into the more clinical systems field, started looking at the electronic patient record systems and things like that were used in the hospitals, and how you integrate that with your laboratory system, how you integrate that with your radiology system so that everything was in one place for a clinician.
Yeah.
Did that for 3 or 4 years, again, in 3 or 4 different roles, different levels of responsibility, from an entry-level programmer up to the person running the project, doing the deployment, and physically doing the purchasing of these £1 million systems at the time.
Yeah.
And then moved on to here at Liverpool Universities. That, like I said, it's an extension to what I was doing there, but it's so wide and varied that I can't see myself doing anything else in the short term. It's really enjoyable, and I get to do a little bit of everything, I suppose. It's a management role that I'm in, but that doesn't stop me from being able to do a bit of work in the integration engine. I still do bits of programming. Mm-hmm. I lead a team of programmers now who do bits of integration work, who build bespoke applications for the laboratory to use to fill gaps in the platforms we buy. Okay. We then attach them to the integration engines and make everything kind of work seamlessly. So, you can be working in one of 7 or 8 applications here in this building, and all your data ends up in the exact same place, and it's accessible to everybody using the 6 of the other applications you're not using. Okay. So I suppose I've been quite lucky in getting that opportunity, but I don't think I ever thought I'd be in the public sector forever either, but it had a draw to me. I enjoy working in the public sector. I enjoy doing something that when you go home, you collect your paycheck, you feel like you've helped a few patients during the day. I was never going to be a doctor or anything like that. This was where my skill set was, but at least you feel like you're actually doing something that matters, not just earning some shareholders some more money.
Yeah, well, it definitely helps in terms of job satisfaction, doesn't it? As you say, to have that feeling that, you're doing something that you're interested in, but also that it makes a difference, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's That's certainly the case. I mean, obviously, in the public sector, the pay doesn't match what you get in the private sector, and the working hours are longer. The pressure can be higher at times. When you've got an outage on your clinical systems and an entire hospital's stopped functioning, you feel that pressure pretty quick. And that's interesting as well. That I thrive on that pressure and being able to work in those types of environments. But I think it's a label of love, isn't it? You've got to want to do it. But that's where I get my job satisfaction.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, just going back a little bit then. So in terms of obviously, our students are coming out of the college at, sort of around 18 years old and looking to go into sort of their first jobs in the industry. Are there any tips you would give to sort of to young people coming out of, their college courses and looking to get their first jobs or first steps into computing? Because obviously the route you took was, you did one thing and tried it and realized it wasn't what you wanted to do, and then you went down this other path. So in terms of most of our students, I think are at this point where they're coming out and having a strong idea of the sort of thing they want to do, but maybe not sure of how to get those first opportunities. So what would you say would be some good tips for someone trying to get a first foothold in the industry?
Yeah, okay. So the first thing I'd say is never rule out an opportunity. My first job was a very entry-level job. It was well below what a graduate would expect to move into, but it was something that interested me. It looked like the right type of role. It looked like it would pay the bills in the short term. So I took that on, and what happened there is you start doing that, you build a network of people. You're in the industry. Once you're in the industry, you start talking to suppliers. Those suppliers will talk to you when there's job opportunities. You will be sat at your desk in the office if you actually get into the office anymore. You'll be sat at your desk, but the person sat next to you will be doing a very different job, and you can learn from that person sat next to you and take those opportunities when they start coming up. I mean, I think in the first 5 or 6 years of my career, I must have changed jobs 4 or 5 times. Right. In the same organization. It was never because I wasn't happy. It was because I was doing something and I saw something else and that seemed more interesting than what I was doing. And I moved gradually through those roles and got more and more exposure to more different areas. I mean, these days, I don't think it's that usual to come across somebody who's been an infrastructure engineer, an integration engineer, a software developer, a database backend engineer. For a lot of people, one of those is their career. I just wanted to learn more and wanted to always get more opportunities. So I'd say, don't look at any job as, well, that isn't really what I want to do in the long term, so I'm not going to give it a go. I'd say give anything a go in the first instance. If it's in the field you want to be in or very close to the field you want to be in, go in and give it a go. And I suppose the other thing I'd say is I have yet to meet a person in the IT industry that doesn't have some kind of imposter syndrome, that doesn't look at themselves and think, I can't believe that I'm doing this job. Right. It's a weird industry because what I learned at university now, not a single piece of that technology is in use anymore. It was 10 years ago, don't get me wrong, but all that technology is replaced. It's all gone. It's not about the technology, it's about the people, and it's about the ability to learn and adapt. And when you're in those situations and you build those networks of people, you can do that. You can be a Java programmer one day, a C programmer the day after, and then decide to move out the programming field entirely into user interface design. Those fields aren't as separate as everybody wants them to be. They are in certain private sector industries. Certainly not when you come to the public sector. You'll have one person doing all 3 of those jobs. And that's a really interesting difference, I think, between the public and private sector. And I'd say to anybody who's coming out of education now, be it at any tier of education, I suppose, and looking to move into work, take whatever's there. The job market can be difficult at times, but once you're in there and you've got a bit of experience, that experience makes the second job easier than the first job was, and then the third job easier than the second job. And every day you build on that experience, but it can be tough. Look for networks of people as well, because there are often them out there. Certainly in the public sector where I am, there are lots of people who will take you on as an apprentice, who will just take you on and give you some guidance, just provide you a bit of mentorship and help you with your applications and things like that. And that can be really, really helpful. There's plenty of people out there. LinkedIn is brilliant for the IT industry specifically. I'm not sure in terms of the other industries, but from an IT perspective, everybody has a LinkedIn profile. Everybody has their history available. And when you're going for job interviews and things like that and job applications, there's a wealth of information on there that you can find about the organization you're applying for and use in those situations.
Okay, so there's some really good sort of tips and advice there about, as you say, first of all, taking any opportunity when they're available. Don't see things as not exactly what you want to do. So I think first of all, obviously for students, although you might have a very narrow idea of what you want to do, ultimately it's good to sort of take, there's lots of different routes in there, and it's good to grab any opportunities you can get with both hands, and then maybe look to sort of move around within those organizations. Also about being adaptable and flexible. And trying to learn, from as many people as possible. And then about once you're in into an organization, about, seeking mentorship from others as well. So I think they're all really good things to take on board, and definitely a good tip in terms of LinkedIn and networking, because I think that's definitely overlooked by some people these days in some industries. But as you say, within computing and IT, it's definitely something that's kind of invaluable, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I see that week in, week out. If I go out to advert for people for my team, I almost expect that those people are going to look me up on LinkedIn before they come into that room, and they're going to know what my background is, and they're going to want to talk to me about that. And I think that's key information. That's what you should be starting in any of those situations. Look at the people in that industry, in those organisations.
So for students, even if it's just as simple as having their sort of education history and the courses that they've done on there as well. Yeah, that's really good advice. So just to move on a little bit then, I mean, we kind of touched on tips there in pursuing, careers in the field. Really then, just to kind of to try and tie some of the loose ends up, is there anything adversely that you kind of wish you'd done differently? Any sort of harsh lessons you've learned that you think, if I had another chance, I'd do it a different way? Or is there anything that you would sort of suggest that, students try and avoid, anything like that?
That's a good question. I suppose one of them goes right back to what I said at the very beginning about my education choice, and the fact that I thought I was going in a certain direction just because I had those qualifications.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. I had good A levels in chemistry and maths, and you know what? Since the day I left college, I've not used them. I haven't. That I wasn't tied to that. It was about finding what I enjoyed doing, and that really mattered. So I suppose what I'm saying there is, don't narrow your field way too much by saying I've got a degree in, or I've got a qualification in X, therefore I'm doing the job in X. It's as simple as before that there's stuff around the edges that you can get into first and move sideways into those organizations.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say is it's that bit about the imposter syndrome I said before, about never think that the people around you aren't sitting at their desk thinking the exact same things you are, because they are.
Yeah.
I've been in teams of 10, 15, 20 people, afraid to open my mouth because I'm the new lad and I don't know. And you do. If you've got the skill, it's something you enjoy, you do know that. And sometimes you just got to stand up and be counted a little bit. I think the harshest lesson I learned was when I was at my previous organisation. I kind of got pigeonholed a little bit into. I lived very, very close to work. So because I lived very close to work, I pretty much took 3/4 of the on-call work because it was easier for me to get in if it broke. And I found myself that the only thing I did all of a sudden was break fixes. And all I did with my day was fix the thing I'd done in the night before when it had broken out of hours.
Right.
I got into a situation where I was like, I'm not enjoying my work anymore because I'm not doing anything interesting or anything new.
Right.
And it becomes so hard to break that cycle that I actually ended up changing jobs. And moving on to another organisation that didn't have on-call responsibilities, so that I didn't get pigeonholed again. However, I don't think that was the right thing to do. I was only at the other organisation for 10 months and moved back.
Right.
I was in a situation where I realised just needed to talk to the people around me. I just needed to communicate and use those people around me and those mentors and say to them, look, I'm not enjoying this, but this is why I'm not enjoying it. And I still want to develop. I want to commit my time to this organisation, but just not doing what I'm doing now. And those people, as soon as you start talking to them open and honest like that, they'll help you because you make their job easier. You know, your boss doesn't see you as a burden, you're an asset. And as soon as you build that relationship with them, you can complete anything in these organizations. You know, I think that was my hardest lesson was not to ever think that you were on your own, because you're not. There's a million people in the same situation as you, and the support networks are there if you look for them.
Okay, so I think there's a great sort of wider point there as well, then, isn't there? As you say about, you know, just communication and being open with people. I think it's something that, as you say, when it comes to, you know, the phrase that gets used often these days, and that you've mentioned a few times yourself about imposter syndrome. You know, I don't feel like I deserve to be here, or I'm not sure what I'm doing. That everybody has those moments. It's, you know, even at the highest level, like in terms of what you're doing. But I think, yeah, as you say, it's a good lesson about sort of the, you know, what we would refer to as, say, soft skills these days, where, okay, you're at college, you're learning all the technical side of things and how to do the day job, but also it's good to, you know, have that communication, speak frankly with people around you, tell them when you've got issues. If you need advice, you can always ask at any level. Like even as Karl says here, you know, Karl's in a very high up role, but he's still, you know, happy when needed to you know, to ask, you know, the people around him for advice and help and for their feedback, and to tell them how he's, you know, how he's feeling in this situation. So I think they're all really good things to bear in mind, no matter what role you go into, is that, you know, people will always be open to that, and they appreciate the honesty. So I think that's definitely really, really good advice. What I always tend to do then towards the end, Karl, is ask people, you know, in your industry specifically, have you got any sort of tips in terms of resources that students should have a look into in their own free time to sort of build their skills up? So any websites or books or sort of YouTube channels or anything like that they should be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think YouTube's a great resource now for anybody, isn't there? You know, if there's something specific you want, that there is a video tutorial for just about everything on there. Mm-hmm. But there are some more specific industry targeted websites. You know, I used, and it isn't free, but I was for the first 4 or 5 years I was at St. Helens. I was a member of a website called Plural Site. Mm-hmm. And that website has very specific learning objectives, and you can sign up to paths on it. So you say, I don't know, I want to be a .NET web developer, and there's a certification path, and you go on there, and all of the videos are there, and they talk you through it, and there's practice exams, and there's everything you need to do that. Now, what I suppose I was different to people around me was I never did any of the exams. I never attempted to get any of the certifications. I just looked at the person sat next to me and went, well, he's struggling with web servers. I'll go and learn how web servers work, and then I can help him do his job. He can help me do mine. Yeah. And those things are there. The Pluralsight's very good, although it's not free. But the certification paths, I think, make up for that, because sometimes it's hard to know where to start, and those things put you at where to start. They give you a beginner level, an intermediate level, an expert level of everything that you're working on, rather than you Googling for something and reading a web page thinking, I don't get 50% of what I'm reading. Yeah. It tailors the content to your knowledge level.
Okay, great. I mean, I'm sure as well, students will be aware of things like this, but it's always good to ask because I think, that often happens in industries that there are people that keep up with certain websites or certain, things to keep on top of. So I think that's definitely one for students to at least have a look into and sort of see if they can find it, if not that, at least similar things. So I think that's good advice. I mean, really, Karl, I mean, that's most of the things covered. And I know you're a very busy man, so I won't take up any more of your time. But yeah, I'm sure this will be really interesting for students, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of questions off the back of it. So I may come back to you at some point and with some follow-ups if you have time.
Yeah, always happy to help. Like I said, I for 1 second when I was in education never thought I'd be doing this job. I've kind of walked the path that I don't think anybody would have seen, but living proof that there's a path to these jobs for
Yep.
anybody. So anything I can do to help them, I'm always happy to talk to anybody. So
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Karl. Well, cheers for your time.
okay, no
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you.
Bye now.